This is Ask an Expat with Marcus and Matt from An Expat's Russia, where we answer your questions about what it's like to live, work, and travel in Russia.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode. Today we have a very special guest, Duncan, who actually is a subscriber of ours. He also has his own YouTube channel where he primarily creates videos about learning Russian. Duncan, welcome to An Expat's Russia. Great to have you. Maybe you want to just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself. But I think the idea we had today for the show was to kind of talk through all kinds of questions that somebody might potentially have who's looking to go to Russia for the first time. Mm-hmm. I understand you haven't been to Russia,
Correct.
But very excited to potentially go. And so maybe just tell a bit about yourself and we'll get to it.
Well, very nice to meet you, Matt and Marcus. I've been enjoying watching your all's channel during these COVID times and just waiting for the borders to open up. I've been studying Russian for almost 15 months now, and it's my dream to travel to Russia one day. And it's very nice to watch your all's videos and with all the experiences you've had there. And I've got a lot of questions I'd like to run by you guys, and especially
awesome.
Especially about visa related, some questions on that, because it's just a lot of questions of especially with the U.S. and Russian relations, and when it's gonna be available for an American to get a visa to Russia.
Right. Okay. So,
Marcus, you're the expert on visas.
Yeah, we sometimes do a webinar with another friend, and he does immigration to Russia, and we kind of I do the visa part, he does the immigration, so it's like getting to Russia is my part, and staying in Russia is his part. So, we'll do the getting to Russia. What's kind of your understanding up to this point, like what you need to do to get to Russia? That'd be interesting to hear.
I have from my research learned that there's companies available that'll help out with. So there's invitation letter, your passport, and the visa are kind of the trinity right there, the three things to get in. So passport's taken care of, and it's just going to be invitation letter, which I'm assuming is not too difficult for these companies to get. I'm sure that's something that's pretty well set up between Russia and US, and then the visa. Now that's the big problem right now, and I do want to touch on duration of time real quick, because this is maybe my biggest question I'm most interested in learning. So we'll jump right into that. Is my dream is I want to go to Russia. I don't want to stay there for like a week or two and just go eat borscht at a restaurant, take my picture at the Red Square, and go home. Like, I want to have an experience there. I want to stay there for at least a year. Is my dream. Maximum would be 3 years. Is that feasible? Is that possible? Even on a tourist visa, could that happen? Okay, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
So let's get into the details, but yes, it's absolutely possible. Real quick, you have American citizenship. Mm-hmm. It is a very big advantage for doing this. You also have kind of like a remote lifestyle where most of your work is done from home, and you could continue to do that in Russia. So you have incredible flexibility actually as an American in that regard. But I'll let Marcus kind of talk about the details.
Yeah, we've been doing visas since 2015, and in 2012 they started the 3-year visa you've probably heard of, right? So an American can get a 3-year tourist visa. Okay, so I'm going to talk in general, and then obviously COVID. So you can get a 3-year tourist visa, and the only stipulation is that you have to, you can stay up to 6 months in the country, but it's a simplified agreement between Russia and America. So what that means is you can leave Russia, enter Russia up to 6 months, leave Russia, cross the border, and then re-enter Russia. So essentially, you could, if you're living in St. Petersburg, that's like a quick train ride, or those marshrutka. I don't know if you know what that is, the little mini buses. You could take that across the border to Finland, come back, and renew your 6-month clock.
Is it really as simple as just like stepping across the line and then stepping back?
Yes.
There is no like paperwork with
Yes.
Finland. Oh my God, that's insane.
No.
So
How do you?
So
But you can't work. You can't work. So like, let's just make the stipulation that it's absolutely possible, but you cannot work because it's not a work visa. It's a student visa. It's a tourist.
What about?
Right.
Okay, not for a company, but what? Let's throw out a crazy example of some way that I can make money. There is, let's say I'm going to a town like Krasnodar, and I let people know ahead of time. Hey, I'm an English speaker. I'll be there. Let's do a study group together. You know, whatever amount of money, $5 or 10, whatever. I don't know, money each. From each person, have a group, and I'll talk for an hour or two, something like that. Would that something that the Russian government would be like, no, you're just simply a tourist, no doing anything like that, or would that be okay?
yeah, so on the basis of a tourist visa, you're not supposed to do that, right?
Boy,
Basically, if you do that, the likelihood of you actually getting caught is very, very, very low.
mm-hmm.
But if you're like broadcasting it out and you get big and catch some attention, then you run the risk of, potentially the worst case scenario is getting deported and banned for 5 years, right? A lot of people are still on visas, like tourist visas. They do private teaching, and they've done so for, even a decade.
Mm-hmm.
So I know some people who they use this 3-year tourist visa to their advantage, but kind of do the private teaching, so nobody would ever catch on.
Okay.
So real quick though, I want to say, if that was your goal, it's actually quite easy to get a job teaching, 15, 20 hours a week at a language school. The salary will probably be crappy, but it gives you lots of free time, and they would give you a work visa. And so if you have a work visa, you can teach on the side. Technically, you're supposed to pay taxes. I'm not a Russian tax advisor. I'm going to say that you probably should pay Russian taxes, but no one will find out if you don't.
Understood.
If you're just taking, money under the table from people coming to a language.
That will be an interesting thing, like especially streaming in Russia. And let's say I'm, donations from, international, maybe from Russia or outside, of how that would work. But I'll figure that out.
So
or you can
yeah, we
explain
have
that.
a lot of people interested in going to Russia with their job that pays them from outside of Russia. That's the main differentiator, right? If you're going to Russia and you're making money from a Russian organization or Russian clients directly, they're paying you directly, in cash or to your Russian bank account. That would be work, right? Work in Russia, and that would be against your tourist visa. But if you have a job that you can work remotely from anywhere, then that is not against the, you're not forced to get a work visa. Actually, you can't even get a work visa because the organization doesn't even exist in Russia. So you can support yourself on your funds from abroad.
Well, so here's the thing. That is technically true, yes, but there are other factors at play. So if you go to Russia and you stay there more than 183 days per year, you become what's called a tax resident. So regardless of where your income comes from, if you've been in Russia and are a tax resident of Russia, you're obligated to pay Russian income tax. Now again, how are they going to find out about your job, that you're working and you're getting all of your income into a U.S. bank account? Well, it's practically unlikely. I'm just telling you what the technical obligation is. That once you've been there more than 183 days, it doesn't matter where the money is, you're taxed on your worldwide income.
Let's just say you're on a tourist visa, you're there for a year, you're doing your streaming or whatever remote work, and you go to the essentially what you'd have to do is you go to the local tax agency and you say, hey, I want to pay my 13% income tax on the money I earn while I'm living here. The tax, people who work there, they'd be like, why are you telling us this? They themselves would be surprised.
Like, what's something?
They're like, so I mean, technically, you should do that, right?
Mhm.
But they would look at you so weird,
Yeah.
because you're,
But I think
willingly kind of disclosing that information.
disclosing tax obligations. Well, I think the biggest problem though is if you are there as a tourist and you overstay 183 days and become a tax resident, you can't technically work in Russia. You can't pay tax in Russia because you're only a tourist, although you're obligated at the same time. So by going to the tax office, you're essentially telling them, I'm here as a tourist, but I'm working illegally. I want to pay my tax.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Well,
Now,
technically,
So you're
I
kind
mean,
of
the
caught
work
in
is
this-
the work is being done in Russia, but it's not being paid by. You're not being paid by
like a Russian company or
Russian
something.
organization. So it's
Now-
it's very vague and obscure. But many people, they just travel long term and they're supported by their business at home.
Mhm. Now, that 180-day span, if I cross that Finland border, is that a reset on that? Or how does
No.
that work? Okay.
No,
I
no,
heard
no.
a yes and no at the
Wait,
same
no,
time.
what are you talking?
Okay.
No. 1 second. Are you talking in regards to tax
Yeah,
purposes?
like
or are
you said,
talking
if
about
you're
visa
180 days,
purposes?
I guess that just counts like, I guess it's maybe not in a row or something, just total of 180 days.
Yes.
It's 183
Understood.
days out of a year.
Okay.
And I believe it's not a calendar year, right, Marcus? It's whatever the last 365 days were. If you were in Russia, 183, or in this case, is it a calendar year? I just don't remember.
Now, I've looked into this. Don't quote me on this, but I believe it was a calendar year. I mean, this was a question for an accountant. I believe it was a calendar year. Because the reason I say that is because when I looked into it, the question was, what if I go at the end, in September, and I work until December, and they said basically it would reset in the beginning of the year. So
Without leaving?
without leaving.
Interesting. Okay.
But we'll need to check on that.
Interesting question outside of the taxes thing is, have you guys ever had an instance with a visa of where the person can come to the Russia, but they have to stay within a certain area, like they can't leave a certain region or something? Does that ever happen?
The only time that's really applicable is if you're doing visa free, coming on a ship to St. Petersburg.
Okay.
I don't think you can technically go anywhere in Russia with that, can you?
No.
I mean, there's no one can really stop you. But
Right. So for example, let's say you're a passenger on a cruise ship into St. Petersburg. You have 72 hours visa free. You can stay in Leningradskaya Oblast, but you cannot leave. Technically you could, and
again, nothing's stopping you
but
because
there's almost no way you're gonna get a train to Moscow, get back on time to kind of, you're not really gonna see anything. So, but if you did get caught outside of Leningradskaya Oblast, yeah, you could get in trouble.
Interesting. I think this.
But that's only for visa.
But that's
free.
most people don't take. Most people just get the tourist visa, unless a lot of Europeans do that visa free thing. But in the visa application and when you're applying, it will say what cities are you going to be visiting. You'll put Moscow, St. Petersburg, and then a lot of the times people ask, do I have to only stay in those cities, or can I go? And once you get the visa, your intention is to go to Moscow, St. Petersburg, but you can travel to other cities as well. So you don't have to put 10, 20 different cities if you're traveling all over.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right. And there is freedom of movement in Russia. Like if you show up on a tourist visa, again, like Marcus said, you're supposed to tell them where you think you want to go, where you intend to go, but you can go anywhere in Russia. There are no restrictions except for some specific areas on the border of Russia. But there's nothing to see in any of those places.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I was sort of worried about that because a Russian friend offered me, he's like, an invitation letter. He's like, I can do an invitation letter, but you have to stay in like my region. I was like, what? Like, that would be so weird to go to Russia and I'd have to stay like in some like minor region.
That's not true though.
Right. Was he talking about a private invitation letter from his name?
Possibly. I don't know
because a Russian can invite a friend, right? They can invite family, friends, whatever,
Mhm.
but they have to go to the local migration office, apply for the invitation. It's like 800 rubles.
And he'd be like my
And-
chaperone there too. Like he'd be like
But-
a
Technically, he's taking responsibility for
Mhm.
you while you're in Russia. Yes.
yeah. But I couldn't leave that region then, though, right? If
No,
we did
no,
that,
you could.
You could.
You could.
Okay, interesting.
Although a tourist invitation costs like $10, and then nobody's taking personal responsibility for you.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I have no idea why.
I think it was just being
Yeah.
nice
One would do
and
the
you
private
know.
visa.
No, he
Maybe,
can.
yeah.
Yeah, he can do that. You can get a 3-year private visa too.
Mhm.
But I would
Wow.
say, like, if he's, I kind of make this joke when we get calls in. Hey, I want a private visa. My friend's inviting me. I would say, if you don't have any family, if they're not family, don't
Mhm.
make your friend walk to the migration office, fill out all the documents, and because he has to show his, his work. How is he gonna financially, potentially, take responsibility
Support
for you?
you.
So I'm like, if they're a real friend, don't make them do that. Just buy the tourist invitation.
When it's not necessary, I'll put them through all the work.
Right.
I guess to come back to the first kind of major question, touch on this a little bit
Uh-huh.
more. So you guys are saying it's completely feasible and completely a reality that I could, like in the next couple months, I could achieve a 3-year tourist visa and be in Russia. So that is a possibility right now in the current situation.
Absolutely.
Well, in COVID, during
ahead, Marcus.
COVID, unfortunately, no. Russia has opened to numerous countries, but the U.S., Canada, and I mean, it's still closed to
Turkey.
right. Well, Turkey's restricted, but they can still enter.
Mhm.
But U.S. passport holders cannot get a normal tourist business, private visa right now,
Mhm.
unless you have Russian immediate family members or an emergency, like a family member is sick, or you have special approval on a work visa or medical. You can get a medical, like a business visa for medical treatment. That's really
Okay.
the only option.
And any sort of tentative idea of when things might open up or when things might change, or
It's so hard to say. I mean, they've announced that June 15th, 2021, it will stay closed until that point, and then they'll make another announcement depending on the country. I don't know. We were expecting between June and September of 2021, but who knows? It could be extended, but there's a lot of factors like number of COVID cases in the country that Russia is potentially opening to, political issues. So
yeah.
we'll see.
Speaking
I
of
don't know.
which, can I hear y'all's opinions on the latest news from the new friction between U.S. and Russia, where I think something with consulates and the embassy are not allowed to be hired? I don't know. Like, what's your all's thoughts on that and what that says about the future of, when the immigration might open up?
Well, I would just say at first that, okay, when the consulate closes, obviously there are potential impacts for Americans in Russia. They can't get a passport, or they can't apply for a immigrant visa for their wife. For example, I have a very good friend who cannot get a green card for his wife, even though he's been waiting for a year and a half. The application has been approved, but they just said the other day, we're not processing anymore. Good luck.
Yeah.
Try to go to another country. That said, on a personal level, at least from my experience, living through probably the worst times in the last 25 years, probably in terms of relations between the United States and Russia. I mean, I was in Russia when the Ukrainian situation started, and Marcus, you were there too. I never felt, I mean, of course, I got a few comments here and there, just ridiculous. Like, what is Barack Obama doing? I remember we talked about this in a recent video. A taxi driver asked me about that once in St. Petersburg. But generally, I never experienced any different treatment whatsoever based upon the politics of Russia and the United States. And we've said in another video that Russians are very good at separating the politics and politicians from average people from a given country.
Well, the
So
interesting
Russians
thing
never looked at.
why that is because
Go ahead,
Russians,
Marcus.
their outlook on their government They know their government is kind of, controlling, overbearing. They're not reliable. They have that experience, throughout history. So they're like, they kind of like brush it off. Oh, that again, kind of thing. Whereas maybe Americans or Western Europeans, we're like, we kind of have trust in our government and rely more. Maybe not today, but Russians never. I mean, over the last 2 decades, they don't really trust in their government as far to take care of them. So,
right,
that's kind of
well, interesting. 2 days ago, my landlord called me, and I told her that I was going to Russia for 6 to 10 weeks potentially, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you need to be careful. There's a war." I'm like, "What are you talking about? There's a war?" She's like, "There's going to be a war with Ukraine between, Russia's going to invade Ukraine. There's going to be a war that spills over into Russia." And I just said, "No, it's going to be okay where I'm going to be. Don't worry." I mean, you can't, the thing is if you say anything, people just go nuts. They're like, no. I saw on the news that Russia's got a massive force of troops that's going to invade Ukraine and destroy the whole country. And it's just, I don't know why people are talking about this. I mean, Russia is posturing maybe, but there's no way there's going to be an invasion of Ukraine and some war between those two countries unless the United States gets involved and provokes the entire thing.
Which, who knows? I mean, it seems like they were sort of posturing like that they want to at least act like they might get involved or something. And maybe there's some vengeance of, Biden was vice president during that time where Obama kind of allowed the Crimea thing to happen. So maybe he's like, I'm going to get back at those, or at least something, something maybe other than the typical sanctions or whatever they would do. But who knows, man?
The sanctions, that's the most laughable thing I've ever.
The unfortunate thing is that, who in the end really suffers, like the government at a governmental level, they're saying, the U.S. government shuts down. So I had my business that's Russia when the Russian consulate in San Francisco and Seattle, they shut down, right? And then there was only Houston, New York, DC now. And then St. Petersburg, the U.S. consulate in St. Petersburg was shut down. And then, so this has happened over the years. Basically, one government says, hey, we're going to restrict these operations because you did this. And then they answer, and it keeps going back and forth. And the only people to suffer are really, everyday people who want to travel and get visas, and especially now with
that's the worst part. The
U.S. consulate saying, "Oh, we can't hire, we can't employ local people anymore, so our staff is cut down by 75%. Sorry, the Russian government is making us do this." Well, it's kind of they started something, so the Russian government is answering. So. Now there's a lot of people with family who can't get to the U.S.
Do you guys think that this eternal battle of posturing between U.S. and Russia will ever end? Like, do you ever see like a relation ever in the future, like a relationship of
no?
Never ever.
I'm beginning to believe, Duncan, that the whole focus on Russia is literally to divert attention away from other issues like the Middle East or China.
Scapegoat stuff of. They're easy to blame, I guess, because
right,
use them as the bad guy in every movie or something like that, a Russian with a scar over his eye and he wants to steal a nuke to destroy America or something. And yeah, it just seems like a convenient thing. And another thing, you said that I think it was an American girl that was like, no, don't go there. There's going to be a war. Was that another American that said that to you, or?
It was actually my landlord was actually Mexican.
Oh, Mexican, interesting.
Yeah, which I thought was even more surprising. If an American said that, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that to hear a Mexican following Russian politics stuff, because I was going to say, like, I met a lot of Russians, and a very common question might be like, what do Americans think about Russia? And my usual answer for them is, we don't really think about you. Like, that's sort of my general answer. I'm like, sorry. I mean, in general, like before I started learning Russian, like I only knew the only thing if I heard the word Russia, I would think of Putin and then stereotypes of, what I see on YouTube with, generic stereotypes and stuff.
Crazy drivers.
Yeah, a bear on a motorcycle on the
Dash
highway or something like that, or the Adidas tracksuit, vodka, etc. So so that's the kind of usual answer. So I'd like to hear your all's perspective on, at least from the other Americans that like what they have thought about Russia, or if anything, or was it that sort of thing of like, oh, they don't really think about it. It's not in their, purview of what they think about.
I think overall, with all of our customers who have gone to Russia, I make it a point to catch up with them after their trip. Not everyone, but the overwhelming response is it's very positive. Like they come back and they're like, wow, Russia was great. But I think that's mostly because, like you said, you don't really think about Russia. You don't really know anything about Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you go there, there's no expectations, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you go there, you have a great experience. You're like, wow, how is this possible, kind of thing. And, there's modern day conveniences, and it's cheap with the, devalued ruble. And it's like, wow, I want to go again. So we've had quite a few customers, come back to get another visa, or obviously they get the 3-year visa. So, they can use that for 3 years. Anytime they want to go, they can use that visa. So,
I think that's the exact same experience I've got. All of my friends of all of the people I've ever met, I've heard people who are upset with maybe their work situation in Russia, or they didn't like, some aspect of living there long term. But I've literally never met someone who's gone to Russia as a tourist and didn't say, wow. If you go to Moscow and St. Petersburg, 3 hours, 4 hours between those two cities, I don't think there's anywhere else in the world where you can go and see two vastly different cities of that scale. And, just so much to do and to see. And then the best parts of Russia are leaving that. And maybe it's not the best place to visit, but going to the Russian dacha and spending time with Russians in their apartments, meeting Russians, just talking to everyday people. The culture is very open, warm, and welcoming. And I think sometimes you don't get that in the big tourist centers, but as soon as you leave, I always found if you're just walking around in a small Russian city speaking English, people are looking at you almost as if you're like Michael Jackson walking down the street.
Wow.
Because they've just never seen that.
Yeah.
And then the experience that comes from that, I've had people invite me into their house just by meeting me on the side of the street. I've had people about my age come up and say, hey, let's go to the bar together. Or, all of this kind of crazy stuff that you just, that wouldn't happen in Moscow or St. Petersburg maybe, but I haven't met anybody who went to Russia and said, oh, this wasn't interesting, or this wasn't fun.
What's the perspective you get from people who haven't been to Russia, though? Like, if you tell someone, if they're like, oh, hey, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I work with a company for Russia. I've been there. Are they like what? Are they, do you see a lot of people fascinated by it, or are they just what's the general response you get from people on that?
Okay, I want to say one quick comment, and then I'll let Marcus answer the question. At my day job, there's a guy, I'm pretty close with him. He's probably one of my, kind of friends, I would say, at work. And he always makes jokes that I'm some Russian spy. And every time I go to Russia, I have to go back and give my report to Putin.
Yes, it's so annoying to hear that.
He's joking, of course, but I think he's also not joking at the same time. I think there's a bit of seriousness to what he's, has in his head.
Right.
Yeah. He
but
might
I don't
have dreamed
know for
of
sure.
some,
but I think that's
weird scenarios.
I would say that most people, again, they have no bearing unless they've seen Russian in the media, right? So it's usually negative and because naturally you want to relate to somebody in a conversation, right? And the only thing that they can relate to is what they know they've seen in the media. And they're like, oh, didn't Russia steal Crimea? And I'm like, well, there's a lot more to it than that. Or, so I typically hear negative comments because that's all they've seen. And, to their credit, they're trying to continue a conversation. But I take the chance to kind of tell them Russia's a great place. You should go. Or like I usually say, have you been there? And they're like, no. And they kind of, it makes them think maybe I shouldn't be spewing out this stuff if I've never been there. So that's generally the response.
Well, I always found it. One thing that really annoys me, Duncan, is that the people who want to talk about Russia the most are the people who know nothing about Russia or have never been there.
That's just how it is with everything, right? Like,
yeah.
Cool.
I remember reading a poll one day. This is way back around the time that the Ukraine crisis happened. They were interviewing Americans on the street, and before they would interview them, they were asking, where do you think Ukraine is on the map? Mm-hmm. And then they asked the question, like, should we go to war with Ukraine? And the people who were the furthest away from guessing where Ukraine actually was were the most likely to say we should go to war with Ukraine. So I think it's an American mentality thing where I have to open my mouth and say something.
Yeah. But
and I find that people in the cities in the United States are way more vocal about Russia. Like if I go back to, where I'm from in the middle of nowhere, Maine, they're just like, that's just weird.
Yeah.
Whereas people in the cities, like I lived in Washington, D.C. for the past 2 years, and people would just say, oh my God, Russia's so terrible. They kill journalists, and the people are completely, I don't even know, dominated. There's no democracy in Russia. And I'm just like, I mean, it's way, way, way different than you think. But
I'd like to hear your perspective, Duncan, on this, because you started learning Russian not ever, being there. What do people say when you tell them, hey, I've been learning Russian, I want to go sometime?
I think it's probably a bit surprising and bewildering for some people because it's so rare for someone to learn a second language in general in America. Like, and to do it seriously or whatever. And normally it's going to be Spanish or, whatever, or Japanese if you're into anime. So to choose Russian is such an outlandish thing. And and just the surprise of it. And also I've generally got like support and like, wow, that's so cool, because it is, like I said, not many people know much about Russia. And that's one of the big attractive things to me is like to go, if I'm going to choose a country to go have this, experience in another country, I'd like it's Russian is what more fascinating place than Russia. Like not a whole lot of Americans have been there. Not many Americans know much about it. And it's so that was a very alluring part of it. But yeah, in general, the reaction from people has been supportive and just kind of, I guess, surprised by the choice, maybe, but they think it's cool.
That's good.
Yeah, I would echo that. In where I came from, where I grew up, that was more or less the thought as well. I really only encountered all of the negative thoughts and stuff about Russia living in big American cities, living in Boston, living in Washington D.C.
Yeah,
and that's just
stuff people have heard on the news
right,
especially with the constant news cycle of kind of anti-Russian or whatever sort of.
We hope you enjoyed this first part of the conversation with Duncan. We will continue in the next video. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. If you've got questions for us or you'd be interested in joining the show, write to us. We're always happy to invite guests. We'll see you in the next video.
This was Ask an Expat with Marcus and Matt from an Expat's Russia. We hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have a question about Russia, let us know in the comments and we'll answer it in another video.